Everyone assumed that Yun Gui Nuan, the orphan daughter of Rong'an Marquis' mansion in Dongling, was a little plague god. She killed her parents, scattered the Marquis' mansion, and the neighbors were unlucky, even her fiancé refused to take care of her. But who knew one day, the weather changed. Yun Gui Nuan casually recognized a younger brother, who was the future crown prince of the Western Moon Kingdom, successfully saved a refined young master, who was the legitimate eldest son of the Yen family in the first generation. Gradually, the nobles in the capital repeatedly showed their affection to her crown prince of Xia Kingdom. She is my sister. If we can't get along with her, we can't get along with Xia, Prince of Yan's parents. She is my life-saving benefactor, you must not make things difficult for her. The legitimate daughter of the Quanchen family. We have a good relationship, don't bother her if you have nothing to do. Princess de Chang. I take good care of her, please don't cause trouble. The shops that Yun Gui Nuan has visited have each earned a lot of money. The mansions that Yun Gui Nuan has visited are prosperous, and even the various immortals in the Kyushu continent want to establish relationships with her. The god of plague has become a god of blessing. Shao. For the sake of my timely appearance, don't you consider accepting me? Someone once said. Idle prince pairs with the lone daughter of the Marquis' mansion. Fighting poison with poison. Later, I changed my tone. It's a strong alliance. Keywords of the novel. After dressing up as an orphan girl in the Marquis' mansion, he became rich without a pop-up window. After dressing up as an orphan girl in the Marquis' mansion, he became rich. Download the complete text. After dressing up as an orphan girl in the Marquis' mansion, he became rich. Latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. 001, Crossing into an Orphan Girl. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1001. Crossing into an orphan girl. Dongling Guojing Street is bustling with traffic. Yun Gui Nuan walked alone on the street, hurriedly walking without noticing a figure following behind. The carriage passed by and a scream of surprise sounded. Hitting someone. The people gathered around and there were two people lying on the ground. Oh, someone has been injured, what should we do? One person whispered. Yun Gui Nuan sat up and looked at the little girl sitting on the ground across from her. The little girl was wiping away her tears, and the person mentioned as injured by the people was this little girl. You twisted your arm and got a scratch. Be careful and go see a doctor later. Yun Gui Nuan tore off a piece of the little girl's skirt and helped her secure her arm. The little girl blushed under her eyes and nodded. A person pointed at Yun Gui Nuan and said, "Isn't that the one from Rong'an Marquis' mansion?" No wonder the little girl was well hit by a carriage. Someone answered, "I'll have to take a detour when I see her in the future, otherwise I'll be hit by a carriage for no reason." A circle of people around showed expressions of disdain and disdain. Yun Gui Nuan buried her head to help the little girl treat her wound, listening to words poking her spine without saying a word. She doesn't understand what happened either. She was originally on a mission and was about to succeed. Unfortunately, she passed away and crossed over to Yun Gui, the daughter of Rong'an Marquis' mansion who was hit by a carriage when she went out. I currently know all of this. Why doesn't anyone care about her life or death when she was also hit by a carriage? Still scolding her relentlessly. Yun Gui Nuan frowned and said to the little girl, "All right." The little girl wiped away her tears and walked away. Hey, she's awake. You're lucky, kid. Fortunately, you didn't kill her. A middle-aged man patted the chubby young man next to him. Did he hit her? Yun Gui Nuan looked over. The young man met Yun Gui's warm, cold and alert gaze, his face changed, and he panicked and patted his hand off his shoulder. I have something else to do, let's go first. He pushed aside the crowd, quickly jumped onto the carriage, and ran away without a trace. Yun Gui Nuan calmly withdrew her gaze and was about to stand up. With a force, her left ankle felt a piercing pain. I twisted my foot. She sat back down in one gulp. Outside the crowd, Yun Gui Nuan's figure followed him with a proud smile and disappeared without a trace. Yun Gui Nuan tried to get up again and reached out a powerful hand in front of her. I didn't feel any pain from falling, did I? Yun Gui Nuan looked up along her arm and saw a smiling face with beautiful features. This person looked young and still a teenager. Isn't this Changtian Gongzi, the personal guard next to Prince Rui? Someone recognized his identity and shouted softly. Yeah, actually let Changtian Gongzi help her up and have good luck. Someone's teeth were sore. But is Prince Rui the kind of person who can help others with kindness? It's strange. Yun Gui Nuan calmed down and noticed a long sword hanging from the boy's waist, with a thin cocoon in his palm. She calmly averted her gaze and stood up forcefully, "Thank you very much." Instinctively, she tends to avoid the kindness of strangers. I don't want to be talked about immediately. Chang Tian calmly withdrew his hand and said, "Miss Yun, you're welcome. You don't need to pay attention to other people's gossip." He turned around and glared fiercely at the person with broken lips. My prince felt that there were too many passers-by watching and blocked his car's way. The onlookers all fell silent. Yun Gui Nuan looked up and indeed saw the roof of a carriage behind the crowd, with a jet-black body and a string of decorations hanging at each corner of the roof. The car curtains were lowered to cover the interior, and a golden pattern was painted around the window frames. With a restrained aura, there is a faint hint of coquettishness. Chang Tian shouted again, "Hurry up and get out of the way." The onlookers quickly made way for the road in front of the carriage. The crowd dispersed, the road was clear, and Yun Gui Nuan could clearly see the carriage parked not far away. The carriage was even taller than she had imagined, probably made of the best ebony. The copper nails on the carriage were shining brightly, and the two black horses in front of the carriage were tall and strong. The coachman stood straight and unsmiling. A strong sense of oppression rushed towards me. That. Yun Gui Nuan was about to say goodbye and thank you, so Chang Tian spoke up first. "Miss Yun seems to have injured her foot, let me take you back." He turned around and glanced in the direction of the carriage, "My master doesn't mind." Yun Gui Nuan looked at the carriage, then at Chang Tian, and took a step back to widen the distance from him. Be wary of the kindness of strangers. A small step stung the eyes of the onlookers. Someone looked down and muttered, "The little plague god is not qualified to ride in the prince's carriage. She should walk back on her own." Yun Gui Nuan's cold eyes swept over, causing the person with broken lips to instinctively silence. She straightened her spine, endured the pain in her left ankle, took a steady step forward, and said in a voice that everyone could hear, "All right, thank you very much for the prince's help in sending the little girl back to her mansion. The little girl is extremely grateful. She doesn't want to cause trouble, which doesn't mean she can tolerate being talked about. Some people can't see her kindness, she just doesn't fulfill their wishes." Yun Gui Nuan glanced coldly and deliberately cast a provocative gaze, which made those people's teeth itch with anger. Prince Rui's carriage was accompanied by a carriage, which seemed to have been prepared long ago. Long days will warm the clouds and help them onto the carriage. Yun Gui Nuan stepped on the footstool, step by step, like a slap on those faces, making a popping sound. What's even more infuriating is that Chang Tian personally drove and escorted Yun Gui Nuan back to his mansion. The carriage ran for a while before stopping. Yun Gui Nuan held her breath and listened carefully to the surroundings. It was very quiet. There was only one person and one horse outside the carriage, and no one else. "Miss, the Marquis' mansion has arrived. Please get off the carriage." The sound of the long sky echoed outside the carriage. "Well, I understand." Yun Gui calmed down and agreed to him. Yun Gui Nuan lifted his hand and lightly lifted the car curtain. The large golden plaque ahead prominently read the 4 characters, Rong'an Marquis' mansion, which was powerful and powerful. The gate of the Marquis' mansion is tall and spacious, full of momentum, with 2 stone lions in front of it. Yun Gui Nuan put down the car curtain and helped the car wall down slowly. "Thank you very much for coming with your master. I'll just go in by myself," Yun Gui Nuan said lightly. "The servants in the mansion will pick me up." Long Day's eyes flickered with fear and doubt. "You're welcome, my master is Prince Rui, who lives on North 2nd Street. Miss, take your time and I'll take you here." Before parting, Chang Tian took out a small medicine bottle from his pocket and handed it to Yun Gui Nuan. "Miss Yun must have twisted her ankle. Here is a medicine which can be dissolved in water and applied to the injured area. Rest for 1 night. Thank you very much. You don't need to be polite. If you want to thank me, I would like to thank my master, Prince Rui, who lives on North 2nd Street." Chang Tian repeated. Yun Gui Nuan didn't think much, bid farewell to Chang Tian, limped up the steps, and the bright gate of the Marquis' mansion was unlocked, with no one on duty in front of it. The vast Marquis' mansion was eerily quiet, with no trace of popularity, let alone no one coming out to greet her. According to the routine, she should be an unpopular illegitimate daughter in the Marquis' mansion, or a legitimate daughter who is oppressed and jealous by a favored concubine. She stepped onto the high threshold and stepped on the square and clean floor tiles of the Marquis' mansion. Li, the familiar mechanical start sound system starts. Yun Gui's face changed as she quickly looked around and tightly closed the door behind her while no one was paying attention. Her bone ring chip has been activated. Without waiting for a response, another wave of excruciating pain struck, and a large amount of memory fragments flooded into her mind. A storm of more memories about the original owner swept through her mind. She was wrong, she guessed everything wrong. She is neither a legitimate nor an illegitimate daughter. It's an orphan girl. The whole Marquis' mansion is so clean that she is the only one left. I'm back again. The last time it ended felt like it was today. See you all at 8 o'clock every morning, collect comments, recommend tickets, and so on. Get up and walk, make money and become rich together with Yun Gui Nuan. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. 002, Bone Ring. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2002. Bone Ring. After Long Tian sent Yun Gui Nuan back to the Marquis' mansion, he returned to the prince's mansion to pay his respects. Prince Rui, Xiao Huayu, returned to the mansion early and was leisurely drinking tea. He was dressed in a prince's uniform, straight and fitting, full of luxury. The embroidered gold thread on his chest and arms outlined his perfect lines, and a jade belt around his waist restrained all his fantasies. I'm back. Chang Tian approached him without looking up. Did he send her to the Marquis' mansion? Chang Tian nodded and said, I have already sent Miss Yun back. Your master is really amazing. How did you know that you would encounter Miss Yun, who was knocked down by a carriage when you went out today? You even asked me to prepare an extra carriage to take her back to the mansion, and I even knew that she twisted her ankle. I asked my subordinates to prepare the medicine for the injury early on. Prince Rui elegantly held the tea cup, his eyes lightly closed, but he smiled silently. Chang Tian continued, Master, isn't Miss not only sprained her ankle, but also damaged her brain? He actually told his subordinates that the servants in the mansion would come to pick her up, but there hasn't been anyone else in the Rong'an Marquis mansion for a long time. She's the only one left. Who else can pick her up? Prince Rui's thin lips twitched slightly, and under his pleasant voice, his smile was faint. Did you break your brain? I'll find out when I see her tomorrow. In the Marquis' mansion, Yun Gui Nuan sat on the ground, taking a long time to digest the information. The Marquis of Rong'an Mansion, also known as her father, was originally a general who unfortunately died in battle when he went out a few years ago. At that time, his mother also went with him, and neither of them returned. She was the only one left in the Rong'an Marquis' mansion. At that time, she was still young and couldn't support the large Marquis' mansion, so the Marquis' mansion gradually dispersed. Now she is the only one in the whole mansion. Yun Gui Nuan sighed and touched his left wrist, opening his bone ring. When she entered the door, she heard the sound of the bone ring activating. The bone ring is a chip implanted in her left wrist bone, but unfortunately it is still an experimental object, and she does not know the specific use of the bone ring. I didn't expect bone ring to follow her to this strange time and space. She flipped through the screen that came to her mind and found a space that was not large, but could be used for storage. Yun Gui Nuan stood up supporting the pillar, applied medicine to her left foot, and got some food. She began to search in the mansion. After she was the only one left in the Marquis' mansion, she couldn't use such a large courtyard alone and was difficult to take care of. So she moved her place of residence to the front yard, and the rest of the area was completely abandoned. There is a main hall in the front yard, with 2 rooms on each side. One side is for her to sleep in, and the other side is used as a kitchen and dining room. Anyway, no one comes usually. After searching through places as big as her palm, Yun Gui Nuan only found 1 land deed, 1 house deed, 1 golden hairpin, and 2 taels of silver. This is all she currently has. Yun Gui Nuan threw all her belongings into the bone ring, speechless and helpless. She couldn't figure out how the original owner, this little pitiful person, survived. If you can't figure it out, just don't think about it. How the original owner lives has nothing to do with her, what's important now is how she should survive. It's already late and she's tired. She'll go out and get some silver tomorrow morning. Yun Gui Nuan inspected the yard and confirmed its safety before returning to the house and falling asleep. The next morning, Yun Gui Nuan woke up early and made breakfast with only a little rice left in the kitchen. He estimated that the street was almost bustling, so he went out to find a place to make some money. The mansion is out of ammunition and food, and if there is no further investment, she will starve to death. The capital of Dongling Kingdom is bustling and bustling, with 4 main streets in the east, west, north, south, and north serving as the main roads. It leads directly from the palace gate to the city gate, and is wide enough for dozens of carriages to walk side by side. Yun Gui Nuan arrived at Su Ji's pawn shop on Dongxi Street in the southeast of the city. She glanced at the plaque at the pawn shop and walked in. "Shopkeeper, I want to pawn something." Behind the counter, the shopkeeper, lazily leaning against the lounge chair and humming a tune, heard the guest come to his door. He jumped up and saw that the person was Yun Gui Nuan. His flattering smile immediately froze on his face. "How could it be you?" The shopkeeper was so shocked that his voice broke. Let's go. You're not welcome here." The shopkeeper's face changed instantly, and he didn't even ask Yun Gui Nuan what he wanted to pawn. He directly threw Yun Gui Nuan out. Yun Gui frowned warmly and his voice became a bit cold. "Shopkeeper, you're a customer when you enter the store. Besides, I just want to pawn something, it's definitely a good thing." She had already estimated that the pure gold hairpin would be worth a good price. She needs to exchange a living capital first, and then redeem the golden hairpin when she earns money in the future. The shopkeeper didn't listen to her explanation at all. "Let's go, don't come to me for bad luck. I want to continue doing business." Speaking, the shopkeeper stood up and personally rushed the people. "My small shop can't accommodate your Buddha statue, hurry up and don't force me to take action." Yun Gui Nuan was pushed by the shopkeeper and stumbled a few steps. "Don't push, I can leave on my own." Yun Gui Nuan was annoyed by the push, making her seem to be holding on to this pawn shop. "You are not the only pawn shop in the entire capital." The shopkeeper was stunned, completely ignoring Yun Gui Nuan. He kept pushing out, and his hand was not weak, with one slap following another, causing her to feel pain. "Let's go, hurry up. Don't ruin my luck, you little funeral star." The shopkeeper pushed and cursed. Yun Gui Nuan's body was thin and weak, unable to withstand the strong push of an adult man. She retreated to the threshold, and just as the shopkeeper slapped her hard, Yun Gui Nuan lost her balance and fell heavily backwards. Done, there are still high steps in front of the door. If you fall directly, you may break a bone. Without time to avoid, Yun Gui Nuan instinctively made a self-protection posture. I promise that this time I will write sweet pets from beginning to end. I will never abuse them or let important supporting roll down easily. Would you like to click on a bookmark, leave a comment, and vote for a recommendation? End of this chapter. Chapter 3. 003, Enthusiastic Prince. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3003. Enthusiastic Prince. A pair of big hands appeared in time, firmly supporting Yun Gui Nuan's falling body, and with a strong force following her wrist, he helped her stand up. I haven't seen you for a day. Why did Miss Yun fall again? Yun Gui Nuan was so surprised that she blinked her eyes. She was the personal guard next to Prince Rui. She suddenly turned around and saw a completely black carriage parked on the street, with a golden pattern around the window frame and curtains hanging down, making it impossible to see the people inside. He helped her twice. Yun Gui Nuan calmed down and thanked Chang Tian. Well, thank you for your help. If it weren't for you helping me in time, I would have been injured again. Thank you, your prince. She glanced at the carriage. Suddenly, I really want to see what this enthusiastic prince looks like. Chang Tian smiled kindly and said, You're welcome. It's a simple gesture. I don't know what Miss Yun is doing here, but she accidentally fell out of the door. As he spoke, he stared fiercely at the pawn shop shopkeeper with a cold face and said, I see some people have itchy bones. If you feel like they have too many hands, you can chop them off and drink. Upon hearing this, the shopkeeper knelt down with a pale face and kowtowed repeatedly, Please spare your life, young master. Please spare your life, Prince Rui. I was momentarily fooled by my carelessness, so I spoke disrespectfully to Miss Yun. I should have beaten you, I should have known my mistake, I should have beaten you. As he spoke, he slapped his face left and right, and clear slap marks quickly appeared on his pale old face. In the capital, no one can offend Prince Rui. Although Prince Rui is an idle prince who does not interfere with the court, he has a fierce and cold personality, and his actions are extremely hateful. Ordinary people cannot understand his thoughts, and if he is accidentally offended, how he will die is unknown. In the capital, they always walk around when they see Prince Rui. Who knew that he was just trying to drive away this little orphan girl from the Marquis' mansion today when he was bumped into by King Rui? King Rui didn't know what to draw, but he actually protected this little plague god. Everyone in the capital knows that this little orphan girl from the Marquis' mansion is a plague god. She will be unlucky wherever she goes. She first killed her own parents and then dispersed the whole mansion. The shops she has been to in the capital either go bankrupt, the boss is sick, or there is an accident at the boss's home, forcing her to leave the capital. Anyway, wherever she goes, she's unlucky. No, she came knocking on him today, and he was scolded by the guards of King Rui. The shopkeeper slapped himself repeatedly, not daring to stop. He didn't even dare to take his strength lightly. The slap was small, so it was important to save his life. Chang Tian turned his head and let the shopkeeper slap him wildly on the side. He restrained his fierce expression and smiled kindly, asking Yun Gui Nuan, Miss Yun is too kind. If someone bullies her, she won't fight back. By the way, is Miss Yun coming to Su Ji's pawn shop to pawn something? Yun Gui nodded warmly and said, There's something I want to pawn out. But she's not so kind that she won't fight back when bullied, she hasn't figured out the situation yet and hasn't had a chance to fight back. Who knew that when the shopkeeper saw her, he was like a twitch, frantically driving her out. If Miss Yun doesn't mind, can I have a look at the items Miss Yun pawned, said Chang Tianwen in a warm voice. Yun Gui nodded warmly, there was nothing to hide. With the cover of taking something from her sleeve pocket, she took out the golden hairpin from her bone ring and handed it to Chang Tian, that's it. As soon as Chang Tian saw the golden hairpin, his face changed. However, for a moment, his smile immediately returned to his face, so fast that no one noticed. Recently, my lord has been looking for some favorite gold tools to play with. If Miss Yun doesn't mind, can you show my lord this golden hairpin? Yun Gui Nuan has no objection, sure. Anyway, she's using this golden hairpin to exchange money. It doesn't matter who she wants to exchange it with, what's important is that she gets enough money. Chang Tian took out a handkerchief from his pocket, carefully picked up the golden hairpin, ran quickly to the side of the carriage, handed the hairpin in, and then, without knowing what the two of them had said, Chang Tian nodded repeatedly and quickly ran back. When he returned, he didn't have a golden hairpin in his hand. Miss Yun, please go over and have a detailed discussion, Prince. Yun Gui Nuan walked to the car window, and a strong aura oppressed her, making her feel suffocated. Although she was not afraid of the prince, her heart was pounding uncontrollably. Her petite body stood by the tall and deep carriage, appearing weak, pitiful, and helpless. It was only then that she realized that her clothes were all old and worn, and even the paint on the carriage could not match it. Thank you to Prince Rui for not disliking her and for helping her twice. Thank you, good people will definitely receive good rewards. How much do you want to exchange the golden hairpin for? A pleasant voice came from behind the car curtain, warm with a hint of laziness, like a good sleep in the spring of March. Yun Gui warmed his ears and said, well, please pay my respects to the prince. Since the prince likes my hairpin, let's ask him for a price. I believe in the prince's judgment. His words were sincere and impeccable. A light smile came from behind the car curtain, so light that it was almost imperceptible. Yun Gui Nuan frowned and tiptoed, getting closer to the window. Suddenly, the person behind the car curtain said, 2,000 taels of silver to exchange for your hairpin, but I don't want your hairpin. It's just a temporary loan for entertainment. When can you raise enough 2,000 taels of silver and come to the palace to redeem it? Borrowing a hairpin for 2,000 taels of silver to go out for people to enjoy is worth the deal. Yun Gui Nuan immediately agreed, yes, thank you very much, Prince. She needs to quickly ponder how to use these 2,000 taels to make more money faster. However, there's something troublesome. The tone behind the car curtain changed. Yun Gui warms his heart and mind, there won't be a bunch of harsh conditions left, right? She calmed down and said, Prince, please speak up. The person in the carriage paused before saying, I have only brought 1,000 taels today. We can first make a written statement that tomorrow you can go to the royal palace to collect the remaining 1,000 taels. Yun Gui frowned warmly, unable to immediately retrieve all 2,000 taels. Will this prince deceive her? Why, I'm afraid I'll deceive you. A light smile came from the carriage. The prince misunderstood. The little girl was just thinking about when it would be more convenient to visit tomorrow, Yun Gui Nuan said with a guilty touch of her nose. There was another light laugh in the carriage. If you think it's okay, just draw a picture, said the car window curtain, opening a gap. A jade-like hand protruded from the car curtain, and two fair and slender fingers with distinct joints held two contracts. Yun Gui Nuan stared at this hand and swallowed her saliva. She took the contract and tiptoed slightly to look inside. On her fair wrist, the lines of her arms could be faintly seen from below, and the golden thread on her clothes shimmered as she went deeper. Pa. The car curtain fell heavily, and a strong fan swept over Yun Gui's warm face, rolling up a light and pleasant woody fragrance. Steady, abstinent, above. Yun Gui Nuan woke up and coughed lightly to conceal her embarrassment. Just as she was about to thank her, a roar rushed to her ear. Yun Gui Nuan. What good thing have you done again? So many people are staring at you. A young man jumped out of the carriage and rushed over. With a face full of anger, I wish I could swallow Yun Gui Nuan alive. Welcome to Xinwen Xinkeng. Pit Product Protection, investing without loss. By the way, I would like to recommend a wave of old articles such as Empress seeks to release her merciless, full text-free, Princess of Emperor's Pet difficulty, and Empress of Emperor's Pet teasing her heart, full text free, if found. How about taking a bookmark, leaving a comment, and casting a recommendation vote when passing by? End of this chapter. Chapter 4. 004, Tomorrow's Prince's Mansion Meeting. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4004. Tomorrow's Prince's Mansion Meeting. In Yun Gui Nuan's mind, something seemed to crack open. As the young man approached, the crack snapped and debris flew horizontally, leaving a memory flying out. Yun Gui Nuan's face changed as he stared at the man. This person is actually the fiancé of the original owner, the current 7th Prince of the Holy See, His Highness Xiaoqiu. Yun Gui's warm eyes turned a bit cold. The original owner had a fiancée, but they were living such a miserable life. They died at a young age and their parents left the royal family. The orphan daughter had no support, indicating that this fiancée was not interested in her at all. Cheap fiancée, don't worry. Why is the little girl here? Your Highness Qi, don't you know? Yun Gui Nuan straightened up and asked in a cold voice. If it weren't for the difficulty of uncovering the pot, she wouldn't have used a golden hairpin as a pawn. After seeing Yun Gui Nuan on the carriage, Xiaoqiu thought she had caused trouble again and quickly called the carriage to stop and rushed down to punish him. Unexpectedly, he was questioned by Yun Gui Nuan and stood still, unsure of what to say. If your Highness 7 is okay, don't disturb me, Yun Gui Nuan said with disdain as he kept his gaze closed. Her transaction with Prince Rui has not been completed yet, and the money has not been received yet. Xiaoqiu was choked by Yun Gui Nuan, her face turning red and white. She used to be always submissive in front of him, but today she dares to confront him. With so many people watching beside him, he couldn't let her sweep his face. Hey, are you mute or foolish? Xiaoqiu roared at Yun Gui Nuan, what good thing have you done again to embarrass yourself here? Yun Gui Nuan carefully read the contract given to her by King Rui, without lifting her eyelids. This cheap fiancé is not worth it. We need to find an opportunity to cancel our engagement. Xiaoqiu felt that his face had been thrown and stepped on by Yun Gui Nuan in front of a commoner's face, with a gloomy and unsightly expression. Especially when he noticed that Yun Gui Nuan was staring at 2 torn pieces of paper with interest and ignoring him, he was so angry that he was about to explode. He stepped forward to grab the contract in Yun Gui Nuan's hand. Yun Gui Nuan skillfully turned around and dodged. Xiaoqiu's recent move sparked a discussion. His eyebrows furrowed high, his fists clenched, and he stared fiercely at Yun Gui Nuan. The person in the carriage coughed heavily. Xiaoqiu took the opportunity to look over and his face changed greatly. He quickly bowed obediently from the ground and said, Uncle Huang. The withered ones have completely lost their previous momentum. Yun Gui warmed his eyes, watched his nose, watched his heart, and silently lowered his sense of existence. It turned out that Xiaoqiu was afraid of Prince Rui. There was no movement in the carriage again. Xiaoqiu bent over and looked up in confusion, Uncle Huang. Facing a weak woman in front of so many people on the street, shouting and yelling loudly is impolite and disrespectful to my royal face. His voice was cold and stern. Xiaoqiu bent lower and said, Uncle Huang has taught her a lesson, but she has been really despicable lately. She has become even more foolish and shameful. If her nephew doesn't teach her a good lesson, her tail will be raised to the sky. What he said is true, Uncle Huang cannot scold him. Rui Wang snorted coldly and said, I usually don't pay attention to her. When she encounters trouble, she comes out and yells loudly. Why do you have such thick skin? I feel ashamed of you. Remember your identity well and don't lose face outside. Xiaoqiu pursed his lips and didn't take it seriously. What identity should he pay attention to? He didn't voluntarily become his fiancée, but since they have an engagement, whether they are married or not, he has the right to manage her. He can't teach her a lesson until Uncle Huang leaves. Don't think that I don't know what you're thinking. Go back and reflect carefully. Don't appear in front of me unless you reflect clearly. King Rui rushed out. Xiao Qiu was not satisfied and still had to argue, but Uncle Huang. 3. King Rui counted down. No need to count one more. Xiao Qiu touched his nose and walked away feeling disheartened. Before leaving, he didn't forget to give Yun Gui Nuan a fierce glare. What kind of wind did Uncle Huang smoke today, actually protecting her? Is he still his own nephew? Yun Gui Nuan thanked the carriage and said, "Thank you, Prince, for helping us out. Where were we just talking about?" Xiao Qiu is grateful to Prince Rui. If he dares to cause trouble again, she will definitely scold him to the point of being shameless. Another 1,000 taels of silver note was handed out from the carriage. Yun Gui Nuan obediently took the silver bill, pressed his hand print on the 2 copies of the contract, and handed one of them to King Rui. Money in hand. "So, will you see me at the palace tomorrow?" Yun Gui Nuan said. There was no response in the carriage. In front of the pawn shop, the shopkeeper's face was swollen like a pig's head. He slapped his face repeatedly and couldn't stop. After Yun Gui Nuan left, Chang Tian shouted to him, "All right." The shopkeeper was numb and still mechanically slapped himself. Chang Tian drew his sword in a feigned manner. The shopkeeper kowtowed and begged for mercy like a soul returning, "Young master, please spare your life. I apologize for my mistake. I dare not bully Miss again in the future." Long Tianling snorted, "Today, for the sake of the prince's good mood, I'll spare your life. Remember some lessons." He unsheathed his sword and made a fork on the back of each hand of the shopkeeper. "You can do it yourself." The shopkeeper kowtowed repeatedly, and blood covered his face and hands. "Thank you very much, Lord, for sparing your life." "Thank you very much, Lord." Yun Gui Nuan got the silver ticket and walked back. On the way, she pondered in her heart what it would be better to make a living with this money. From afar, she found that the 3 floors inside and 3 floors outside the front gate of the Ho mansion were all human. "What are you doing?" Her voice was clear and crisp. The onlookers saw that she had returned and were very conscious of giving way. Looking down the alleyway, there was a person lying on the steps in front of the door, dressed in tattered clothes and unsure of whether they were alive or dead. Yun Gui's eyelids warmed and he jumped forward in 3 or 2 steps. He felt his pulse and was still alive, but his face looked weak. During the inspection of Yun Gui Nuan's condition, there was another discussion nearby. "Take a look, what is the god of plague? This is, a well-behaved person steps on her doorstep and suddenly falls down. You say, evil is not evil. Did you see it with your own eyes?" "Of course, I watched this kid walk straight on the street with my own eyes, his steps windy and his complexion very good. When he walked to this gate, it was as if he had been hooked by black and white impermanence and suddenly fell unconscious, becoming what he is now." The words added a lot of embellishment. Yun Gui Nuan gave a cold smile. This person was thin and weak, with weak qi. It should have been caused by long-term hunger. His face was pale, his cheeks were hot, and he had a fever for some reason. Looking at his shabby clothes and severely worn shoes on his feet, it can be roughly inferred that he is a small beggar who has been wandering without a fixed place for a long time. Today, he accidentally walked to her doorstep, and his body couldn't hold on and fainted. Yun Gui Nuan turned her head and shouted at the crowd, "Don't look at the excitement anymore, go get a doctor. What are you talking about when someone falls in front of you and refuses to save you?" There was a commotion in the crowd, and no one moved. Yun Gui Nuan looked at the slightly immature face of the little beggar, pinching his pulse and furrowing her eyebrows. She only knew first aid, didn't know how to treat illness, and had no medicine. Only a doctor could save his life. She has done many life-threatening tasks before. But she won't turn a blind eye to death. She pointed to the two sturdy men in the front row and said, "You two, help me carry him in, and you, go and get a doctor." Pointed to a young man who looked at his agile legs. The boy listened and quickly ran away to invite the doctor. Those two sturdy men stood in place. "You see me, I see you, dare not move. This is the home of the plague god, entering it will bring misfortune. What's the big man fussing about? Come and help." Yun Gui Nuan became angry and shouted at them, "You're still thinking about that little bit of caution when it comes to life and fate." The two of them nervously touched their noses and walked forward, carrying the little beggar into the Marquis' mansion. "Shao! I scolded my annoying nephew away. Remember to come tomorrow, showing off your face." End of this chapter. Chapter 5:005, Little Beggar. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5:005. Little Beggar. There was no suitable place for the little beggar to lie down in the Marquis' mansion. Yun Gui Nuan directly led the person into the main hall, where there was a bed that could be used for lying down. After the robust man put the person down, Yun Gui Nuan thanked them and said, "Thank you very much for your help." With a thank you, the two of them blushed and fainted. Although the little beggar had nothing to do with Yun Gui Nuan, she was enthusiastic about saving people. On the other hand, they were talking about their concerns, which was not as good as a little girl. It was truly embarrassing. One of them spoke out, "Miss Yun, if you need any help, just let us know. We don't have anything else, we have plenty of strength." The person next to him agreed and said, Yes, you can tell me. It's important to save people." Yun Gui Nuan waved her hand and said, "No need, thank you very much for your help. We'll wait for the doctor to come next." In the main hall, there were only Yun Gui Nuan and the unconscious little beggar left. Yun Gui Nuan let out a small sigh, and the money he had just exchanged went out before covering the heat. She took the opportunity to look at the main hall in front of her, except for a bed and a desk, which were empty without any extra decorations. The walls were all bare, and the main hall walked in a minimalist style. "You lie here obediently, I'll go pour you a bowl of water," Yun Gui Nuan said to the unconscious little beggar before running to the kitchen to pour water. Coming out of the kitchen with water in hand, I happened to meet Dr. Su, who was rushing in. The young man grabbed Dr. Su's medical box and said, "Doctor, hurry up. It's a matter of life and death." He learned the warm tone of Yun Gui. Dr. Su dragged his heavy steps, panting heavily. I know. Isn't this enough? He's a half-old man who can't keep up with the young man's legs and feet. Half of his life is almost on the road." Dr. Su saw Yun Gui Nuan and bowed, "Miss Yun." "The patient is here," Yun Gui Nuan said, holding water in one hand and pointing to the main hall with the other. Dr. Su gave the little beggar a pulse and the result was the same as Yun Gui Nuan's guess. The little beggar fainted at her doorstep due to catching a cold and fever, coupled with hunger. Dr. Su prescribed the medicine and handed it to Yun Gui Nuan. Yun Gui Nuan asked, "Thank you very much, doctor. How will the diagnosis fee be charged?" Dr. Su glanced at Yun Gui Nuan and then glanced at the minimalist main hall. "There's no need for a diagnosis fee. If you have money, it's better to keep it for him to take medicine and eat. He's weak and needs to be taken good care of for a while. Nourishing illness costs more money than treating it." Yun Gui Nuan pursed her lips and said, "Doctor, you have to pay for the diagnosis. I can afford it." She just exchanged a hairpin for 2,000 taels of silver. Dr. Su looked at Yun Gui Nuan's resolute gaze and sighed in his heart, "How about this? I won't accept the diagnosis fee. Take this prescription to my clinic to get medicine, and take care of my business." Yun Gui Nuan felt it was feasible and agreed. Dr. Su was escorted to the entrance, and the crowd of onlookers had not yet dispersed. She gave them a fierce glare and slammed the door shut. As she passed by the kitchen, she heard some movement inside. Yun Gui Nuan immediately became alert, and it was hard not for someone who was too busy to sneak in and watch the excitement. There was a back door in the kitchen that connected to the outside, which used to be used for servants to walk. Dare to venture into the home of the God of Plague, and not be afraid that the plague will make you unable to leave. She picked up a wooden stick in her hand and kicked open the kitchen door. She hadn't seen anything clearly, and a familiar headache hit her. I have regained some memory. Grandma Zheng, she instinctively shouted out. Grandma Zheng quickly came up to support Yun Gui Nuan and asked with concern, Miss, why did you suddenly cover your head? Are you okay? This middle-aged woman named Aunt Zheng cooks for the original owner at regular intervals every other day, and Aunt Zheng helps with firewood, rice, and food. Thanks to Aunt Zheng's care, the original owner has been able to survive for the past few years. Yun Gui Nuan waved his hand, indicating that there was nothing wrong, but he was speechless about the memory of the recovery from the ventilation style. She said to Grandma Zheng, Grandma Zheng, there is a patient in the mansion who is in the main hall. Could you please take care of him and make some food for him? I'll go and get some medicine. After the explanation was completed, Yun Gui Nuan went out to take medicine, but there was a delay in the process. She spent 10 taels of silver on the medicine and even bought a medicine jar. Grandma Zheng was feeding congee to the little beggar when she came back. Grandma Zheng said to Yun Gui Nuan, Miss, the food is ready. Let's go eat first. Yun Gui Nuan glanced at the little beggar, with a pillow under her head and a thin bed on her body. She touched her nose, and Aunt Zheng was more meticulous than her. Halfway through the meal, Grandma Zheng came over and without saying a word, helped to decoct the medicine without asking about the origin of the little beggar. Dr. Su said he can recover after taking a rest after his fever subsides. Yun Gui Nuan said to Grandma Zheng, if it weren't for Prince Zhao's 1,000 taels, she wouldn't be able to save people. Grandma Zheng, do you know Prince Rui? Yun Gui Nuan remembered the black carriage, but there was no memory of Prince Rui in his mind, so he was very curious. Zheng Apo, busy living, said, I've heard that the prince is the younger brother of the Holy One today, ranking 10th, but not born to one mother. When the late emperor was still alive, we all called him the 10th prince. Zheng Auntie continued, the prince is an idle prince who is not good at power and strategy. He is an excellent person, kind to others, and good-looking. If his appearance is second in the Dongling kingdom, no one dares to call him first. Many noble princesses want to marry the prince, but the prince doesn't even glance at him. Until now, the prince hasn't married yet. Inside and outside the words, Grandma Zheng gave Prince Rui a harsh compliment and added 2 personal questions. Yun Gui Nuan followed with a nod, this Prince Rui is quite kind. But judging from what she experienced today, it seems that there is a slight discrepancy between her words of treating people kindly and Zheng's words. Is this Prince Rui interested in someone? He's still unmarried at such an old age. In my memory, the Emperor of Dongling Kingdom is over 40 this year, and even the Crown Prince is 20.1. The prince is old. Grandma Zheng seemed to have heard the terrible news and rushed to the female protagonist holding a medicine bag. Miss, have you lost your memory? Yun Gui's warm and cold sweat suddenly came down. Not only did she lose her memory, but she also changed her soul. The original owner had already gone somewhere. Looking at Grandma Zheng's frightened face, Yun Gui Nuan took a guilty sniff and said, Grandma Zheng, medicine, medicine. Zheng Grandma withdrew her gaze and turned to continue pounding the medicine jar. The prince is still young, 1 in 20, just in his prime. Yun Gui Nuan blinked and said, what a young prince. He is the same age as the crown prince. Grandma Zheng cooked the medicine jar over heat and immediately reminded her, those ingredients are all placed in the old place, the firewood is chopped, and you can use it directly. Come back when you're old. Yun Gui Nuan looked at the dishes in front of her and listened to Grandma Zheng's familiar advice in her ear. She slowly turned her head to look at Grandma Zheng and said, speaking of which, I have been taken care of by Grandma Zheng for the past few years. Thank you very much. In my memory, all the servants in the whole mansion had been dismissed by her earlier, and she didn't have any extra money to pay them wages. But this Aunt Zheng would cook for her every other day and bring her groceries. For years she not only didn't need any wages, but also paid for groceries on her own. Over the years, this was a considerable expense. Judging from Grandma Zheng's attire, she doesn't seem like someone who can afford this idle money. There is no reason in my memory to tell her why Aunt Zheng has been taking care of her. Who is the mastermind behind her? Grandma Zheng's eyes, which seemed to have a deep understanding of everything and were puzzled by Yun Gui Nuan, made her heart flustered. In those eyes, there was maturity and clarity that did not belong to her age. Miss has changed, she is not the same Miss as before. This sentence sounds really grateful to her, but in fact, it is asking who the owner behind her is. Yun Gui Nuan is very sensitive. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. 006, Sister is so kind. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6006. Sister is so kind. Zheng Auntie calmed down and continued with Yun Gui Nuan's words, Miss, I've seen you outside. You can say thank you or not. Once the old man's meal is ready, I'll go back first. After speaking, Grandma Zheng walked away from the back door of the kitchen. Yun Gui Nuan tidied up the dishes and waited for the medicine to be cooked before carrying the medicine bowl into the main hall. The little beggar is still unconscious. Yun Gui Nuan sat down on the edge of the bed, scooped up a spoonful of medicinal juice, and slowly delivered it to the little beggar's mouth. Suddenly, the little beggar opened his eyes with a sharp glint. Yun Gui Nuan only reacted for a moment and quickly dodged the fierce palm wind, but still took a step slower as the medicine in the spoon spilled. Who are you? Cough. The little beggar sat up. He was already physically weak, and his intense exercise just now made him even more uncomfortable. Now he is completely relying on one breath to hold on. Yun Gui Nuan stood still, holding the medicine bowl steadily in his hand, with a worried expression on his face. She's not worried about the little beggar, she's worried about herself. Her reaction slowed down. She hadn't noticed it when she was at the pawn shop earlier when the little beggar suddenly took action. She almost avoided it, which was impossible in the past. You speak, cough. The little beggar became anxious. Yun Gui Nuan stood in the same place, holding the medicine bowl steadily with one hand and carrying his back with the other. You fainted in front of my house, and I saved you. If you want to survive, just drink your medicine obediently. If you think your life is long, go out now. She is not someone who refuses to save in the face of death. He is not a great kind-hearted person with compassion. Did you save me? The little beggar muttered. Yun Gui Nuan raised his eyebrows. Sister. The little beggar shouted and rushed to Yun Gui Nuan. You saved my life, you are my savior, you are my sister. This voice made Yun Gui Nuan howl in confusion. D. Li, Level 1. The bone ring rings. I just saved you by hand, and I'm not your sister either. Yun Gui Nuan glanced at the little beggar's bare feet and said, the ground is cold, and you're still hot. Go up and sit down. The little beggar obediently sat back on the bed and said, I know you're not my own sister, but you saved me, and my life is yours. I'll be your younger brother, and I'll protect you from now on. Yun Gui Nuan quietly looked at the little beggar's small body and said, drink the medicine first. She handed over the medicine bowl, money cannot be wasted. The little beggar continued, this family, cough cough, there are more ways for two people than one, right? Yun Gui Nuan raised his eyebrows and said, drink the medicine. She can consider accepting this free labor force. The little beggar took the medicine bowl and said with bright eyes, I used to rank third at home. Yun Gui Nuan has a 15-year-old younger brother named Sanlang. She tidied up the empty room next to the dormitory for him to live in, but there was no need to tidy it up. This was an empty room and she needed to add some items inside. There are many doubts about Sanlang, such as his alertness when he first opened his eyes, his unknown identity, and his ability to see through her situation at a glance. All of this tells her that Sanlang is not an ordinary person, and recognizing him as a younger brother requires taking risks. Yun Gui Nuan returned to the main hall and said to Sanlang lying on the couch, "I'll go out and buy something. You can rest first." Yun Gui Nuan bought bedding and pillows for Sanlang, as well as 2 sets of clothes and a pair of shoes. With an extra family, he had to make himself look different. The money in the wallet that hasn't been covered in heat has been spent again. Returning to the mansion, Yun Gui Nuan laid out Sanlang's bedding, burned hot water, and used a bone ring to transport the hot water to Sanlang's room, which was effortless, but the space in the bone ring was not large, so he had to make 2 more trips. Yun Gui Nuan returned to the main hall and said to Sanlang lying on the couch, "You go back to the room to take a shower and change clothes, then rest in the room and bring this bed, mattress, and pillow." "Thank you, sister." "Sister is so kind," said Sanlang sweetly. Sweet-tongued children have sugar to eat. Yun Gui Nuan sat down to check the bone ring. When Sanlang recognized her as his sister, she heard the ring 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 ring. If she heard it correctly, her bone ring had upgraded. Opening the screen, as expected, the time is displayed in the upper right corner, and her bone ring is elevated to a level in the upper left corner. There is a bracket next to it that surrounds a line of words. Popularity point +1, there is also a small red dot next to it. The little red dot on the screen couldn't bear it anymore. She clicked the red dot and a program entrance appeared on the main page. Bone ring space. Yun Gui Nuan read the words on it and clicked in. The detailed information of the bone ring appears on the page. Current level. LV1 popularity point. 1/5. She raised her eyebrows, it seemed that with even more effort, she could still upgrade. There is a pane at the bottom of the information page with the words, "Exchange," below it. Yun Gui warms her eyes and shines brightly. Like in the system text, she can exchange her bone rings for necessary items, and then exchange the exchanged items for money. Her life is guaranteed. Her bone ring is not a waste bone ring. Yun Gui Nuan opened the exchange with great anticipation and looked dumbfounded. Helmets, bulletproof vests, gliders. This is something that can be exchanged at level 1. Yun Gui Nuan exited and clicked in again, and the page still clearly displayed these 3 items. Is there a malfunction? Yun Gui Nuan shook her arm. Great joy followed by great sorrow. Other people's systems help their owners live better, earn money, and become wealthy. Her bone ring only wants her to perform tasks, and these 3 items are among the most frequently prepared items for her to perform tasks. Task, don't even think about it, it's impossible. Yun Gui Nuan angrily closed her bone ring. She died because of the mission and came to a different time and space. Why do you still think about letting her go on the mission? That feeling is like you've been working overtime, finally waiting for annual leave, just lying on the big bed of a 5-star hotel, when the boss calls you to work overtime. Just like a 40-minute physics class, when the bell finally rang, the physics teacher helped her glasses and calmly said, "Let's talk for another 2 minutes." Yun Gui Nuan sneered twice, then turned off her phone and kicked the podium. In this life, even if the heavenly king Laozi comes, she will never take on any missions. She wants to become a free and unrestrained person again. Yun Gui Nuan punched the desk with a heavy hammer. Is that a young lady? Outside the main hall, there was a middle-aged man probing his head. He was frightened by Yun Gui Nuan's fierce and powerful punch and dared not come in. Yun Gui Nuan straightened his body and coughed lightly, "It's me, uncle, come in and sit down." She knew this person and immediately remembered it when she saw his face. This uncle has the surname He and is the owner of a rouge shop in the east of the city. Every month, he sends some rouge powder to the original owner. No wonder there are so many bottles and jars of rouge and toner on the dressing table. It turned out that this uncle gave them to me, thinking that the original owner was addicted to buying rouge and toner, which made me poor. Uncle he sat across from Yun Gui Nuan in a familiar manner and said, "Yesterday I waited for you in the shop for a long time but didn't see you. Later, I found out that you were hit by a carriage yesterday. Are you okay?" Yun Gui Nuan shook her head and said, "It's okay, thanks to Prince Rui taking me back to my mansion. Yesterday, the original owner was probably hit by a carriage on the way to collect rouge and powder." Uncle he looked pleased and said, "The Prince of Rui is not bad." Yun Gui Nuan raised his eyebrows and praised Prince Rui. Prince Rui's reputation in the capital is really polarized. Sister is long, sister is short, follow sister to have food to eat who would come to mind when it comes to the term sister. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. 007, Waiting for the Prince. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7007. Waiting for the prince. Uncle he placed the package in his hand on the desk and said, "Here are 2 boxes of rouge and makeup powder for this month." Yun Gui Nuan glanced at it and accepted it. "Thank you very much, Uncle he." Uncle he, like Grandma Zhang, would come to take care of her at regular intervals for unknown reasons. Suddenly thinking of something, Yun Gui Nuan tentatively said, "It seems that every month before, I went to Uncle He's shop and brought back these rouge and water powder myself. Over the years, thank you to Uncle He for always giving me rouge and water powder. In my memory, the time she went to the rouge shop was regular and fixed." She stared at Uncle He's expression, not missing any details. Uncle He waved his hand and said, "Yes, on the 20th of every month, you come to my rouge shop to pick up rouge and toner. Yesterday, when it was time, I didn't even see you. I thought you had encountered something, so today I came to bring rouge and toner to you myself. Seeing that you're okay, I feel relieved." Speaking, Uncle He let out a sigh and looked lonely. Yun Gui Nuan asked, "What's wrong, Uncle He? What's the good end sighing for?" Uncle He said, "This is the last time I will send rouge, toner, and powder to Mississippi. The store will close next month." Yun Gui Nuan raised his eyebrows and said, "Why?" "In my impression, Uncle He's rouge shop has been open in the capital for almost 100 years, and the quality of his rouge powder is very good. Why did it suddenly close?" Uncle He looked melancholic and said, "I'm not afraid of being laughed at by the young lady. The business of the shop has been bad this year and it's almost impossible to continue. This month is already the end of the line, and next month there's really nothing we can do. Unfortunately, we won't be able to send rouge, water, and powder to the young lady in the future." Yun Gui Nuan finished listening and fell into contemplation. Uncle He's shop is a time-honored brand with good product quality. If it can be revived, it can earn a lot of money. Just treat her as repaying Uncle He and helping herself earn some household income, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Yun Gui Nuan comforted Uncle He, "Uncle, don't worry. Maybe the shop is just having a bad business for a while, and there is still a turning point. It's a pity that the old shop will close if it's closed." Uncle He listened and just shook his head. Seeing off Uncle He and returning, Sanlang stopped her. "Sister." Yun Gui Nuan was not used to having an extra younger brother, and after a while, she realized, what's going on. Sanlang stood at the door of the room holding bedding and pillows. "You can take these back," he said. Yun Gui Nuan looked over and saw Sanlang change into a new outfit. Although it was simple, it was very clean. He was thin, but his body was long. Wearing simple clothes on him also looked good, with a neat and elegant temperament. His facial features were beautiful and slightly childish, but his face was slightly pale. "Do you no longer need bedding and pillows?" Yun Gui Nuan asked him. Sanlang said, "These are new, for my sister to use. I can use the previous ones." Yun Gui Nuan blinked and said, okay. Sanlang walked towards Yun Gui's warm room holding the bedding and said, sister, I'll help you put the bedding away. Closing the door and leaving, Sanlang asked a heart-wrenching question, has my sister been alone all these years? Yun Gui Nuan suddenly didn't know how to answer, well, I guess so. Sanlang smiled and said, I won't be able to bully you anymore. Yun Gui Nuan was taken aback, and all kinds of emotions surged in his heart. Is this the feeling of having family? The next day after finishing lunch, Yun Gui Nuan told Sanlang, I'll go to Prince Rui's mansion later. You can come back before dinner. Remember to take some medicine. Sanlang nodded and said, I will take care of the house. Yun Gui Nuan has never been to Prince Rui's mansion, but her mind always has the phrase, Prince Rui living on North 2nd Street, in her mind, so she almost effortlessly found Prince Rui's mansion. The imposing gate directly surpassed her small and dilapidated mansion. Yun Gui Nuan came forward and knocked on the door. The gatekeeper poked his head out and said, Miss Yun, please come in with me. Yun Gui Nuan touched her nose, but she didn't say a word. In the flower hall, Xiao Huaiyu asked his servants to bring freshly brewed tea. As soon as he picked up the tea cup, he rushed in for a long time. Prince, Miss Yun has really arrived at this point. He ran too fast and accidentally bumped into Xiao Huaiyu's hand, flipping over the teacup. I know, Xiao Huaiyu gritted his teeth and stared at Chang Tian. Look at what you've done. The spilled tea spilled all over Xiao Huaiyu's body, soaking between his legs in an awkward position. There was also a lot of tea dripping down his hem, with a puddle of colored water stains on his feet. She has already come in, what do you say? Xiao Huaiyu looked at Chang Tian coldly, wishing to cut him alive. It's too late to change clothes at this time. Chang Tian felt embarrassed as he rubbed his head and said, Your Highness, there is an accident that can be remedied. He quickly found a handkerchief to dry the water stains on Xiao Huaiyu's body, and spread a blanket over Xiao Huaiyu's legs to cover the water stains. Prince, Miss Yun won't be able to see that your clothes are wet. But it looks like there's something wrong with the legs. He couldn't care about so much for a long time, so he grabbed the teacup and smashed it onto the tea stain. Everything seemed like he had just accidentally broken a cup of tea. Xiao Huaiyu bit his back teeth and knocked on Chang Tian's forehead twice, You're really a little clever ghost. He bought a new teacup. Prince, she's here. Chang Tian rubbed his head, pointed outside and called the servant seriously. You guys, clean up all these fragments. Yun Gui Nuan walked into the flower hall and happened to see the servant clearing away the fragments of the teacup. Little girl, please bid farewell to the prince. Yun Gui Nuan lowered her head slightly and noticed the blanket on Xiao Huaiyu's leg. Is Prince Rui not very agile in both hands and feet? The little girl came to the palace as agreed to retrieve the remaining 1,000 taels of silver, she said. Xiao Huaiyu coughed lightly and said, you sit down and have a cup of tea first. I have already sent someone to retrieve the silver coins. Yun Gui nodded warmly, but the prince's voice was still so pleasant. She stood up straight, looked up, and suddenly her head began to dizzy, as if a black curtain had been pulled up to block her view. She tried to open her eyes to look at King Rui, but couldn't see his face clearly. What's wrong with the prince, leaning to one side? She opened her mouth and fell to the ground. When Yun Gui Nuan opened her eyes again, she stared at the top of the bed and couldn't recall her thoughts for a long time. Where is she? Her mind was in chaos. The top of the bed in front of her became blurry and clear. She suddenly opened her eyes and sat up. This was not her own room, it was the Prince Rui's mansion. Yun Gui Nuan touched her head and suddenly fainted. Miss Yun, you're awake. A woman dressed as a maid walked up and bowed, I'll start spring. Yun Gui Nuan looked around the magnificent room and quickly got out of bed. I'm really sorry, I suddenly fainted and caused trouble for the prince. Could you please bring the prince over? I'll leave immediately after completing the transaction. Li Chuan said, the prince has ordered Miss Yun to have dinner in the mansion first. The prince will come to the palace to attend the banquet, but he won't be able to come back for a while. Yun Gui Nuan suddenly looked out the window and realized that the sky was dim. How long did she sleep? Yun Gui Nuan touched her head, but she seemed to remember a lot of things, awakening all the memories in the original owner's mind. Except for the part about Prince Rui. Okay, I'll wait for the prince to come back from the mansion. Chang Tian. Your Highness, you don't need to change clothes anymore. Am I very smart? Proud face. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. 008, Stay at the Prince's Mansion. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8008. Stay at the Prince's Mansion. After dinner, Yun Gui Nuan realized that there was someone waiting for her to eat with at home. Miss Li Chuan, could you please do something? Yun Gui Nuan called Li Chuan, could you please send someone to help me deliver a message back to my mansion? Li Chuan was stunned for a moment and said, Miss Yun's instructions are as follows. Yun Gui Nuan said, just say, I'll be back later tonight. Let him not worry, and if possible, I'll also bring some light food along. She forgot about San Lang, I'm really sorry. At the moment, I can only ask the people from Prince Rui's mansion to help. Li Chuan was taken aback and said, yes, Miss Yun, don't worry, I'll arrange it immediately. She tried hard to suppress her doubts and fears. Isn't there no one left in Rong'an Marquis' mansion? Who did Miss Yun send food to? Yun Gui Nuan waited until very late, not until Xiao Huaiyu came back. She stood up, her gaze turned, and waved at Li Chuan, Miss Li Chuan, come over here for a moment. Li Chuan has been guarding the room all along, and when giving orders, he only calls his servants to the door. She walked over, her tone always friendly, Miss Yun, do you have any instructions? Yun Gui Nuan grabbed Li Chuan's arm and turned around to push him onto a chair. Her arms supported the armrests, placing Li Chuan in front of her every inch. Miss Li Chuan, I have a few questions to ask you. Li Chuan widened her eyes and stared at Yun Gui Nuan, her face reflected in her pupils. Miss Yun, if you have anything to do, just give me an order, she said. Yun Gui Nuan curved his lips and said, what is the name of your prince? She knew that Prince Rui's name was Xiao Huaiyu, and there was his private seal on the contract. Li Chuan said, the name of the prince. His name is Xiao Huaiyu. With a "oh" sound, Yun Gui Nuan leaned closer and said, is your prince married, or does he have a crush? Or is there any female family in the palace? The question is a bit private, but it should be asked. Li Chuan stared at Yun Gui Nuan's enlarged face in front of her and swallowed saliva. Miss Yun is really good looking. The prince has no wife, no beloved, and there are no female relatives in the palace. Only in this courtyard are there maids. Li Chuan answered truthfully. Yun Gui Nuan raised her eyebrows and said, what is this room used for on weekdays? She lifted her finger in a circle. At first, she felt something was wrong, but after careful consideration, she finally realized where the problem was. How could there be such a warm and elegant room in the mansion, a prince who is unmarried, has no beloved, and no female relatives? From the style of the decoration, it is obvious that this is a woman's room. Yun Gui Nuan looked at the flustered inch of Li Chuan in her eyes, her heart beating faster than before. Isn't it convenient to answer? This is a guest room. Li Chuan glanced at her randomly. Guest room. Yun Gui Nuan chuckled lightly. I thought it was the house of some female family member in the royal mansion. If that's the case, wouldn't it be too impolite for me to sleep here? Li Chuan quickly shook her head and said, Miss Yun misunderstood. This room is specifically designed for female guests. The prince did not allow her to say that this courtyard was specially prepared for Miss Yun. Miss Yun is so close to her, she can't breathe anymore. Yun Gui Nuan squinted her eyes and looked gossipy. So, do we often have female guests staying overnight in the royal mansion? Otherwise, there is no need to carefully prepare such a room. At the beginning of spring, I realized that I had said the wrong thing. She wanted to cry without tears, but that's not the case. Just thinking about how to explain clearly, she heard footsteps. The prince is back. Li Chuan quickly said. Yun Gui Nuan suddenly stood up straight, calm and composed, as if nothing had happened. A large expanse of fresh air surged in front of Li Chuan, and she quickly took a few breaths. She lowered her head and stood aside, afraid to watch the clouds return warm. As soon as Xiao Huaiyu entered the room, he glanced at the two of them. Thanks to the care of the prince today, what kind of good wine did he drink tonight and still enjoy himself, said Yun Gui Nuan. Xiao Huaiyu sat down and glanced at Li Chuan, whose head was hanging low and wishing to be stuck in the crevice. Miss Yun has been waiting for so long, he said. He avoided the issue of clouds returning warm. Yun Gui Nuan stood in front of Xiao Huaiyu and said, "It should be because I suddenly fainted and caused trouble for the prince. I took something and left immediately, so I won't disturb the prince. It's already very late now." Xiao Huaiyu supported his head with one hand and half squinted his eyes, feeling slightly drunk. Chang Tian, give Miss Yun 1,000 taels of silver notes. Chang Tian approached with a smile on his face and said, "Miss Yun, silver ticket." "Thank you very much, Prince. It's not too early, I'll say goodbye," Yun Gui Nuan said as he put the silver ticket into his bone ring. "Wait a minute," Xiao Huaiyu called out to Yun Gui Nuan, his voice heavy with drunkenness. "It's getting late, Miss Yun is not safe to walk alone on the street. If you don't mind, why don't you stay overnight at the Wang mansion and go back tomorrow morning?" Yun Gui warms her eyebrows and wraps her arms around her chest. Xiao Huaiyu leaned back, looking even lazier. His eyes were half squinted, and his slightly tipsy voice was a bit hoarse. "Miss Yun, I'm sorry that I drank too much tonight and couldn't entertain you well. If you stay overnight, I'll treat you as my compensation." Yun Gui Nuan raised her eyebrows. As a dignified prince, there was no need to apologize to her. Moreover, it was her fault for fainting and causing trouble. She just wanted to take the money and leave. But Yun Gui Nuan swallowed his saliva in frustration. Xiao Huaiyu's stunning appearance, coupled with his half-drunk and half-awakened hazy eyes, was too much for her appetite. To be honest, the decoration style of this room is all the type she likes. Her preference is tightly controlled. Yun Gui Nuan agreed to stay overnight. Xiao Huaiyu left with Chang Tian, humming a tune and feeling extremely good. "You can tell from your eyes that it's her, she's finally here." Chang Tian was very puzzled and said, "Prince, is it not good for you to deceive Miss Yun like this? His prince didn't attend the palace banquet tonight, he pretended to be drunk. Yesterday on the street, the prince had more than 1,000 taels of silver coins on his body. He alone carried tens of thousands of taels of silver coins, and his prince was not short of money." Xiao Huaiyu frowned and reached out to knock on Chang Tian's forehead. "Just keep talking. These are all my good intentions. If she doesn't do this, she won't stay." Chang Tian covered his head and felt aggrieved. "Prince, you're hitting my head again." Xiao Huaiyu stopped and bent over to approach Chang Tian, pausing word by word, "I haven't settled the teacup matter with you yet." With a tap, he turned around and strode away. Long Tian was stunned in the same place. He rubbed his head and suddenly realized, "Prince, I was wrong. I shouldn't say Miss Yun ruined her brain." The next morning, Chang Tian personally drove Yun Gui Nuan back to his mansion. Yun Gui Nuan got off the carriage and saw a row of people in front of the Marquis' mansion, holding tools as if cleaning the roof tiles and plaques. No wonder the interior of the Marquis' mansion is so dilapidated, and the facade is still shiny. It turns out that someone is taking care of it. She walked up the stairs and was greeted by the person who was cleaning the doorpost. "Hello Miss Yun." The tone is familiar, not the first time. Yun Gui Nuan asked him, "Who hired you to do things?" "She doesn't have this spare money." The person smiled and shook his head. "We don't care about these things when we work. If we have money, we work. Sister. Yun Gui Nuan still wanted to ask, but was caught by Sanlang and brought into the mansion, with the door tightly closed. Changtian. Prince, I won't talk about Miss Yun anymore. Don't hit my head. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. 009, There are wild men in the Marquis' mansion. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9009. There are wild men in the Marquis' mansion. Chang Tian had been waiting in front of the Marquis' mansion for a long time, without leaving. His original intention was to watch Yun Gui Nuan enter the Marquis' mansion before leaving. At the moment he saw Sanlang, he widened his eyes in fear and his face turned green. Prince, something's wrong. There are wild men in the Marquis' mansion. Sanlang looked left and right, making sure Yun Gui Nuan was fine, before taking a long sigh of relief. Sister, as long as you're fine, you haven't returned all night. You're so worried about me. Last night, a stranger knocked on the door and said she would come back later. She also brought him food, but to his surprise, he waited all night without anyone. Encountering some minor incidents, I'm fine, don't worry. Yun Gui Nuan handed him the food box in his hand. I brought you breakfast. She eats and drinks well at the Prince Rui's mansion, so she can't miss this younger brother. The two sat down in the dining room. How long have those people outside the door been here? Yun Gui Nuan asked. Sanlang replied, I've been here for a while now. I asked them why they're here. They clean the bricks, tiles, pillars, and door plaques. They come once a month. Sister, do you really pay attention to the facade? Yun Gui's face was warm and solemn. It's not me. Do you think I'm someone who has the money to do such superficial skills? Another person appeared, following Aunt Zhang and Uncle He, who regularly appeared at the Marquis' mansion to help her, but the mastermind behind it was unknown. This is already the third group of people. In the dark, she felt like someone was taking care of her. Ah. Sanlang glanced outside the door. It's not you. You keep eating, I'll go out and take a look. Yun Gui warmed up, and the people cleaning in front of the door were all gone. The pillars and plaques were wiped clean and shiny, and there were a few drops of water stains in the corner. If it weren't for this, she would have thought it was an illusion. She frowned and looked around, then walked towards the east of the city. He Ji's Rouge shop is located in the east of the city, just as Uncle Hao said. At the entrance, Luo Ke is sparsely populated, while the Rouge shop across from him is thriving. Yun Gui Nuan walked around the store when a young man came up to greet her. What do you want to buy, Mississippi? I'm looking for your boss. Uncle He invited Yun Gui Nuan to the back hall. There was no tea, so he could only treat her with plain water. Yun Gui Nuan naturally doesn't mind. Miss Yun laughed. Uncle He sat across from Yun Gui Nuan, feeling very embarrassed. There is no business in the shop, it is cold and quiet, and even the tea leaves for entertaining guests cannot be taken out. It's really unreasonable to invite guests to drink plain water. Yun Gui Nuan came straight to the point and said, Uncle He, do you want to revitalize the shop? Just now she looked around and found that the quality of the goods in the store was good. Uncle He looked up and down at Yun Gui Nuan, then shook his head and said, it's useless. Business is not good, and we can't even sell the goods. Yun Gui frowned warmly and said, Uncle He just needs to answer whether I want or not. Uncle He was shocked by Yun Gui Nuan's strength, and he nodded twice. Of course I do, he said. No business owner hopes their store will go bankrupt, so the bigger the business, the better. Yun Gui Nuan pondered, Uncle He, let's take a look at what inventory is still in the warehouse. We're going to have a big event in the near future. First, we'll build momentum, then use discounts to attract customers and promote our reputation. Uncle He's store is a time-honored brand with good products, but its reputation is not well known. The fragrance of wine fears the depth of the alley. Yun Gui Nuan roughly explained his plans to Uncle He. Uncle he is a businessman who can understand what Yun Gui Nuan is saying, but his face still looks embarrassed. To be honest with Miss Yun, your idea is great, but the shop can no longer take out any extra silver on its books. The shop hasn't done much business this year, and in order to maintain quality, they have to regularly produce new products. They were originally small businesses, but they have been throwing money at each other, so they can't hold on anymore. Otherwise, they wouldn't have planned to close down. Without saying a word, Yun Gui Nuan took out the silver banknotes from his bone ring and placed them on the table. Here are 1,800 taels of silver banknotes. Is it enough for a big event? She hasn't covered the hot silver bill yet. Uncle he widened his eyes and picked up the silver banknotes and counted them twice. It was really 1,800 taels. Miss Yun, how could she have so many silver banknotes? Enough, it's more than enough. Uncle he looked at the silver bill and furrowed his brow again. It's just that we can't use Miss Yun's money. Miss Yun's kindness is well received by Uncle. Uncle he pushed the silver ticket back to Yun Gui Nuan. Yun Gui Nuan was a bit unhappy and hesitated. Uncle he doesn't have to feel embarrassed. This money is just my investment in the rouge shop, and I'm not giving it to you for free. If I can bring the rouge shop back to life, Uncle he can give me 3,000 taels within 3 months. If I can't, just give me 1,800 taels for free. Uncle he was frightened by the warm aura of Yun Gui. Miss Yun used to be gentle and weak all along. How could she suddenly become stronger and still do business? It's like a different person. Speaking of which, Uncle he hesitated. Dad, the opportunity is right in front of you, why hesitate? A person came in outside, who was the servant who had just called Yun Gui Nuan. It turned out that this person was He Jiang, the son of Uncle He. He Jiang greeted Yun Gui Nuan and continued to persuade Uncle He. After all, Uncle He finally agreed. Yun Gui Nuan left with 1,800 taels of silver and her idea. 3 days later, the century-old shop He Ji Rouge shop was going to hold a celebration event, and they were busy. Across from the He Ji Rouge shop is the Su Ji Rouge shop. Su Ji's shop assistant saw Yun Gui Nuan enter and called the shopkeeper to watch the excitement. Look, the one from Rong'an Marquis' mansion has entered. He really needs to close now, the shopkeeper sneered. 2 years ago, how could I still compete with them for business? Now, it's not possible. Who said they have contact with the little plague god of Rong'an Marquis' mansion? The shopkeeper also had a gloating expression on his face. Look at what day it is today, and calculate how long He Ji can last. When He Ji falls, we will have more business and more money, haha. The shop assistant quickly agreed, with a flattering expression on his face, I wish the shopkeeper a good fortune in a day of hard work. The two of them kept watching the excitement and saw Yun Gui Nuan come out. They frowned and winked at Yun Gui Nuan, and if they didn't care about her identity, they would whistle twice. Yun Gui Nuan ignored the idle people and went around the street to buy something before returning to the mansion. Sanlang has already gone crazy with anxiety. Sister. Why did you suddenly disappear again? I thought she was kidnapped by someone in front of the door. Didn't you just go out and take a look? Yun Gui Nuan touched her nose and said, sorry, I won't do it next time. It's almost lunchtime and I bought you something delicious. Sanlang should still be in his old age, so he needs to eat something good. Sister. I'm telling you the truth. Sanlang was furious and took everything from Yun Gui Nuan's hand. Don't disappear without saying a word in the future, it's very dangerous here. If it weren't for him not being able to go out, he would definitely be by her side. Cloud Gui Nuan replied with a smile, well, I remember. Let's eat first. I bought fish porridge and roast chicken. After dinner, you should remember to drink medicine. She spent a lot of money to buy them all, they should be cherished. After finishing the meal, Yun Gui Nuan spread out the paper for bookkeeping. Long day is so joyful, let him take on the responsibility of happiness in this article. Okay, Miss Yun is starting to make money and make money. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. 010, Su Jilai smashed the field. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Su Jilai smashed the field. Yun Gui Nuan went out this time and bought paper, ink, brushes, and inkstones. She laid a thick stack of paper on the table, cut it out, and bound it into a book. What is sister doing? Sanlang asked, pulling out a piece of paper and touching it twice. It was the most commonly used and ordinary plain rice paper in Dongling Kingdom. Bookkeeping. Yun Gui Nuan walked quickly and just started. There weren't many accounts, so he quickly finished writing them. Sanlang leaned over to take a look. Yun Gui Nuan finished writing the account book and pushed it to Sanlang. Can you read? Sanlang naturally pulled over the ledger and nodded. I recognize a few words. Yun Gui Nuan didn't think much and cut another stack of paper without binding. She picked up her pen and quickly wrote a full page on it. She didn't stop and continued to write. Sister, Sanlang suddenly asked, why is your account book only for outgoing items and not for incoming items? There is also a significant expenditure. There isn't much money in total, and I spent over 1,000 taels today. Yun Gui warmed her eyes without blinking, continuing to write about her. These are necessary expenses in the early stage, and there will be more and more input in the future. Anyway, I don't have much money, so it's useless to stick to it. It's better to give it a try and have investment to reap the rewards. Sanlang nodded with a vague understanding. Sister, what are you writing? Sanlang leaned over to look. Yun Gui Nuan quickly raised her eyes and pushed the paper filled with words toward Sanlang. Can you write? Sanlang nodded and said, I can write a few words. Yun Gui Nuan threw him a pen and said, copy what I wrote. Sanlang was taken aback and quickly browsed through the content on the paper. He smiled and agreed, okay. The two of them buried their heads in work and quickly passed the afternoon. The sun was setting in the west, and Yun Gui Nuan put down his pen and stretched lazily, organizing the things they had written together. She looked at the words written by Sanlang, neat and neat. It must have been years of practice, and the strokes of the characters were deliberately restrained and sharp. She looked over the paper and saw Sanlang. Sanlang was not only a scholar, but also not a simple one. It was not as simple as knowing how to write a few words. In the past, in order to better adapt to her identity when taking on tasks, she specifically practiced writing with a brush, which was quite impressive, but Sanlang's handwriting was enough to describe it as beautiful. Why has sister been looking at me all this time? Sanlang confidently met Yun Gui Nuan's gaze, but it seemed that Yun Gui Nuan had a ghost in his heart. Why are you writing these stories? He copied 2 stories in an afternoon, one about a fox fairy and the other about the love story between a celestial fairy and a mortal, which he had never heard of before. Yun Gui Nuan sorted out all the paper, a thick stack, and shook it in her hand. These are all for making money, she said, making money. Sanlang frowned, sister, are you going to tell a story? You don't have to worry about it anymore. I can earn more money in the future, and it won't be a problem to support you. Yun Gui Nuan shook her finger. 3 days later, Heji's rouge shop celebrated with the sound of gongs and drums, and a sea of people. Yun Gui Nuan hid diagonally opposite Heji's rouge shop and secretly looked around. From the current situation, the customer flow met her expectations. She pulled out a veil and put it on her face, taking advantage of the crowd to sneak into the store. Isn't it true that she is the little plague god? Before the business improves completely, it's better for her to cover her face to avoid causing trouble for Heji. Yun Gui Nuan pretended to be an ordinary guest while browsing the store. According to her ideas, different products are promoted using different methods, including lucky bags, buy as a gift, and even a certain amount of accumulated discounts. In short, buying more offers more discounts, and in addition, Heji's rouge and powder are already cheap. Every customer who comes in has bought a lot. Yun Gui Nuan turned around and found that the best-selling one was Lucky Bags. Combining different products based on inventory and product value to sell at the most affordable price not only offers great value for money, but also surprises customers. This sales method is unique to the entire capital city. Yun Gui Nuan picked up a bag of Lucky Bags to pay the bill. He Jiang, who was in charge of collecting money, recognized Yun Gui Nuan at once, with the resolute determination in his eyes that he would never admit his mistake. Cloud. He Jiang wants to say hello to her. Yun Gui Nuan made a gesture of silence. It is important to make money now. If customers know that the little plague god from Rong'an Marquis' mansion has arrived, they may not want to come and buy things. He Jiang called his father over. The two of them sat down in the back hall. Uncle, he could afford to buy tea to entertain Yun Gui Nuan this time. Thank you very much, Miss Yun, for your help. Business is really good today. I've seen so many customers enter the store for a long time. The customers who couldn't squeeze into the store were queuing outside, and the accumulated inventory was cleared. They were tirelessly making new rouge powder. Yun Gui Nuan smiled, all of which was expected of her. Uncle He, you're welcome. You've taken care of me for so many years, and it's only right to help you. Besides, you just treat me as shallow, just to make some money for yourself. Miss Yun is too polite. You are smart and clever, and earning a little money is just a waste of talent. Uncle He took out 1,000 taels of silver from his arms and handed them to Yun Gui Nuan. Miss Yun said she would give you 3,000 taels within 3 months, but I don't think it will take 3 months. Not to mention giving her 3,000 taels, 10,000 taels is more than enough. Miss Yun only needs this amount, it's really kind. Miss Yun is the great benefactor of He Ji. Yun Gui warmly accepted the silver ticket with a smile. On the first day of the activity, she collected 1,000 taels faster than she had imagined. Yun Gui Nuan asked, there are so many customers outside. Uncle He should go and greet them, and I'll take a look myself. Su Ji across from He Ji didn't have any guests today, and all the guests ran to He Ji. The shopkeeper counted the flies all morning and finally couldn't help it. He called the shop assistant and said, go and see what's going on across the street. Damn it, the guests are all flocking to He Ji. The shop assistant took advantage of the crowd to sneak into He Ji. There were many servants in the crowd who helped the owner pick up the goods, so he didn't stand out in the crowd. Su Ji, the shopkeeper, watched as the waiter sneaked into He Ji. He hadn't come out for a long time, but he remembered pacing in front of the door, walking around and around. After nearly 15 minutes, the waiter finally returned. Why did you go for so long? The shopkeeper scolded. The shopkeeper looked excited and raised 2 items in his hands. Shopkeeper, look, I've bought a lot of good things back. I've got all the rouge, water powder, snail and dye makeup powder, only 5 taels of silver, and I've seen them. Their things are cheap and good. Fool. The shopkeeper slapped the waiter on the forehead. I asked you to inquire about the situation, not to buy things or give them business, let alone praise them. He Ji is Su Ji's opponent. The shop assistant silently thought, oh. The shopkeeper looked at the waiter with a silly expression on his face and couldn't help but feel angry. Go away, I'll go over and take a look myself. Shopkeeper Su struggled to squeeze into He Ji, where people crowded inside. In the blink of an eye, the shelves in front of him were empty and quickly filled again. He was extremely angry and jealous, and even at the best of Su Ji's business, he didn't have the same sales speed. What kind of bad luck did you have today? Business is so good. Uncle He came out of the back hall and stood still in place. What's wrong, Uncle He? Yun Gui Nuan asked. That person is the shopkeeper of Su Ji's rouge shop across from him. Uncle He pointed to one person in the crowd and saw him at a glance when he came out of the back hall. In fact, Yun Gui Nuan's first bucket of gold was 2,000 taels given by Xiao Huayu. Can you recommend tickets or small hearts to Miss Yun, who is working hard to make money? End of this chapter.